It's expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of The Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 90.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. As always, we promise robust conversation. Today will be no different. Got a great guest, people that are providing wonderful service and leadership, inspiration to our community, and I say to humanity as well. But I want to begin by acknowledging that we are in the middle of Pledge Drive here at KFAI. And Pledge Drives means it's your time to show up and support, to add your voice and your support to this program, The Conversation with Al McFarlane, and to our station, our mission, KFAI. So I've got with me today my manager of the program, Brother Miguel from KFAI. Miguel, how you doing, man?
Hey, we're doing all right, Al. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you for being here. So why should people step up, show up, and be part of supporting this phenomenal work that we do?
Well, we have many reasons. But of course, hosting the conversation with Al McFarlane, hosting your program on our platform weekly, every Tuesday is a great reason. I really enjoy you and the crew and the company that you bring every week to discuss international issues, but also local issues as well. And this is what community media does: is it creates outlets for this kind of local media to make connections to the bigger picture as well. And yes.
And so what do people get when they support outside of engaging conversation, great music, great cultural insights? We also gift people to acknowledge and appreciate their support. What are some of the things people can get by becoming a member supporter of KFAI?
Well, we have, we have so many different levels that people can give at. Really, any amount matters. But of course, we have at many different levels. We have T-shirts, but we also have larger levels where there's that involves the station T-shirts, but also a luncheon here with the KFAI staff. Also a recording session, an hour recording session, so that a program may air later sometime in the future. All sorts of levels, because it takes all sorts of inputs from many different folks, and it doesn't matter the size or the amount. All you got to do is just call 612-375-9030, or go to if you want to go to the internet, go to kfai.org and support community media like The Conversation with Al McFarlane and KFAI as well.
Let me say it again. I'm going to second that motion by saying the magic words again. Go to our pledge line, 612-375-9030. And that's if you're listening here in Twin Cities, but you're anywhere in the world, because we are global with kfai.org. No matter where you are, go to kfai.org and pledge to support this program and to support KFAI. And The Conversation with Al McFarlane. So, Miguel, I'm going to have you come back every few minutes and just keep reminding people that right now, this is about us in community showing up. We're streaming the program live as well across several platforms. So some people may be connecting with us through the Black Press of America, Black Press USA, their YouTube channel. Some may be connecting through the Insight News YouTube channel, YouTube /Insight News MN. Some through formerly Twitter, now X, some through LinkedIn, and some through Facebook. And so I want to say that no matter where you are, your presence is both appreciated and valued. And we invite you to support this work. If you are in one of those online communities, go to kfai.org and pledge your support. Drop a note to me in the chat and let me know that you're here and that you're supporting this program. Thank you for the likes when you do that. And share. Like, share, subscribe, but share your support, donate. Donate at kfai.org, anywhere in the world. Or if you're local or anywhere else as well, you can call the pledge line 612-375-9030. Well, let's get going. And Miguel, like I said, please stand by because I'm going to invite you back again and again to join me in inviting people to subscribe, to support, to become members of KFAI.
Thank you very much, Al. We'll be here.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to continue and bring in my guests today. I've got two great guests. I'm going to bring them on at the same time because what we do is just mix it up. We bring in people that are all committed to building community and each in their own way. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing, having a conversation with my friend Damon Jenkins. Damon Jenkins is Senior Vice President and Regional Market President of First Independence Bank, Twin Cities. And, you know, that is Minnesota's first Black-owned bank. And we want to talk to Damon about how that business is reshaping the idea of economic opportunity, how it's advancing financial literacy, and how it supports small businesses and families across our region. Also, I'm going to bring in my guest, Braxton Haulcy, Executive Director of Walker West Music Academy. It's one of the nation's most respected African-American-led music schools. And he's going to talk about the Academy's $19.5 million expansion, about its community impact, and about the grand opening of the new 16,000 square foot cultural destination in St. Paul's historic Rondo neighborhood. And together, we'll be talking about the importance of financial literacy and access for economic justice, the role of music and culture in healing families, community culture, youth development, and why intentional investment, both financial and cultural, are key to a thriving community. As always, this is a celebration of legacy and of leadership, of building institutions that serve, protect, and uplift our people. And we want you to support this by becoming a member, a subscriber. Two ways to do it. One, obviously, support our work here at KFAI at kfai.org. I gave you the number. I'll give it again. It's 375. Just double check here. 612-375-9030. Call that number. You can also support this program by becoming a subscriber to the conversation at YouTube Insight News. And subscribe, share, and like. It all brings more people to be in community together. Well, Brother Damon, Brother Braxton, both of you, welcome. Good to see you both. Let me start with you, Damon. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Al. How are you?
I am well. And I'm glad to be in conversation with you again. Let's start by giving people the value proposition. I always like to start with First Independence 101. Let's tell the story.
First Independence 101. And so, first I would say thank you. It's always a privilege and a pleasure and an honor to sit around the table and have conversation with you. I have to call out from a media perspective, you have been one of the first and a continued support of the bank. And I just wanted to say thank you. In regards to the bank, I love telling this story. I probably have shared this story over a couple hundred times now, but each time I tell it, I get a different type of feeling. So, First Independence Twin Cities was one of the positive outcomes of the George Floyd murder and the aftermath of what took place. I also would say it's one of the positive outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic, because during the time that we made the decision to come here, we were dealing with just those two pandemics. As I reflect on First Independence Bank as a whole, meaning as it originated 55 years ago in Detroit, the irony Al, is that it's one of the positive outcomes of the 1967 riots in Detroit. You know, and so you see the parallel. So unfortunately, we still relive those things, but you know, out of darkness comes light, and I believe out of those dark times was the birth of First Independence. So in 1970, just to catch everyone up who's not fully aware of the bank, and then how it got to the Twin Cities in 1970s, the bank was originated by business owners and community leaders that was really looking to bring a resource that could serve as a beacon of hope to Detroit. You know, after the 67 riots, there was resources that was needed, but there was hope. And this was an institution that stood bold and said, we're going to stand up a financial institution, and we're going to create resources, not just for the communities that we intend on serving, but we're going to create career pathways for folks that look like us to serve as execs and leaders in the bank. And I don't know, you know, I wasn't quite that old in 1970, but I did my research, and I found out that if you walked into a bank in 1970, it was very uncommon to see Black executives in that space. And so here, First Independence created the opportunity for Black executives, in my opinion, to serve at that higher level versus being the help or processing transactions through the teller lines. And so, you know, the bank has pridefully grown and served as that resource. And then shortly after George Floyd's murder, there was an opportunity for the bank to answer another community call. You know, community was hurting here, and the root cause of what we saw play out here, especially with some of the behaviors of individuals and communities, was a lack of resources. And so fortunately, the bank had existing relationships with some of the larger banks. And as the larger 5 banks, and I have to call them out for the sake of recognition. So US Bank, Wells Fargo, Bremer, Huntington, and Bank of America got together and said, in this market, what could we do that creates some systemic change that will outlast the moment in time that we're in? And so based on relationships, it was a great opportunity to bring First Independence, which is a minority deposit institution, and say, hey, would you be interested in coming here, being a part of this ecosystem and helping us address some of the issues that not just specifically challenge communities of color, but challenge people in general. How can we work together to make banking more inclusive for communities in this region? And so those banks decided to help First Independence come here, stood up some capital, some revenue generating. I, at the time, was working at one of those said banks, and they offered me up as an opportunity to stand this bank up and really grow it to be a beacon of hope in the Twin Cities. And so I had the opportunity to start with First Independence Bank. And I can't believe we're approaching 4 years since I started with the bank, right? And you remember those conversations before we even opened. And here this month, in a few weeks here, next week, we're turning 3 years old. And so it's been a pleasure. It's been fun. You know, we've had some challenges, but I'm quite proud of what we've been able to get accomplished so far.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm talking to Damon Jenkins. He's the regional market president for First Independence Bank, and telling a wonderful story. It's a story, an origin story, the birth of First Independence Bank in Minnesota, the birth of Black-owned banking in Minnesota. And the wonderful part of the story is that both this bank and its mothership, the original bank in Detroit, both arose out of conflict, out of turmoil. And here we learn that, you know, about the resilience of our community, about the capacity of all sides of the community to collaborate, to figure out how to address the situations that lead to a sense of disenfranchisement, a sense of injustice, a sense of inequity, and how to provide the tools, the pathway, the resources that can move community, individuals, homeowners, parents, families, and businesses forward. That certainly is the mission and the work of First Independence Bank. Locations.
You know, we've been busy. We launched our first location at 3430 University Avenue, Southeast. That's where we had our grand opening. And 7 months later, we opened where I'm currently stationed, our home office at 2217 East Lake Street. You know, that was a very deliberate and intentional about bringing banking, community banking to East Lake Street, understanding that it was just minutes from where the murder of George Floyd took place. But then when you think about the challenges and the need for banking resources, this was one of the communities that was in dire need of that. And so we've been fortunate enough to be here and to work to now having 2 locations, be able to provide banking resources to both Hennepin County and Ramsey County communities.
Thanks, and shout out to my friend Michelle at Michelle's Delicious Delight. She joins us every day faithfully from out on the East Coast, and she says greetings to Brother Allen and distinguished guest. And distinguished guest is the appropriate description of my guest, Damon Jenkins, the regional market president of First Independence Bank, and he'll be joined momentarily. This conversation will open momentarily to our friend and colleague, Braxton Haulcy, who's executive director of the Walker West Music Academy. Damon, I also love having you tell and listening to you tell the Damon Jenkins story, because I think we can't do that enough. You know, people need to know that this kid in the neighborhood, you know, and with the family that surrounded him, you know, and inspired him, was able to rise to become an executive in a major bank and become then the president of a regional bank. So tell the Damon Jenkins story again, if you would.
Sure. You know, I like to say that I stand on the shoulders of my mother, Olivia Smith, and I have to call her out because she raised 5 boys and 2 girls by herself. You know, she was the visionary. You know, 37, probably almost 40 years ago, she made a decision to move us from Kansas City, Missouri to Minnesota. And now you have some ties to Kansas City.
That's
you
where I was
know,
born.
outside of good
That's where I
barbecue
was
and
born,
good
yeah.
booze and all that, you know, there was challenging times, particularly for our family in regards to a lack of resources. And so 37 years ago, my mom moved us here, and she was the one that introduced me to home ownership, because a year and a half after we moved here, my mom joined an organization called Acorn. And they work with her to repair her credit, to help her manage her money, to, you know, form the habits and behaviors of saving and managing debt. And as about a year and a half later, she purchased our first home. And that, what you talk about, representation and exposure. So that piqued my curiosity. Like, okay, well, this, you know, before that happened, we were destined to be what I would call lifetime renters. And now my mom stood out there being a single parent, raising 5 big, hungry boys and 2 girls, and she still carved out pathway to get into home ownership. And so that was my first introduction into this pathway of building wealth and creating generational wealth. You know, I grew up in South Minneapolis. I tell people I am South Side. You know, I am a true South Sider, where I went to elementary, high school, and graduated from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, all South Side. I had the opportunity to meet my wife while I was in college, and ironically, she's North Side. She grew up North Side and went to North. And so our families share a rich, deep understanding and experience of what community looks like, but also we personally we personally experienced, or by relationships with other people, we were able to see some of the disparities and the discrepancies and the inequalities that took place in underserved communities. And we're talking about people. And I grew up in a neighborhood where poor did not play a favorite. You know, you had, you know, a variety of faces, both brown, black, white, that were poor. And so we saw firsthand the need for resources. And so fortunate enough, I had the support system where my mom made us join the Boys and Girls Club. And through join the Boys and Girls Club, I became a club kid. And what that did was that exposed me to different avenues and pathways towards success, furthering my education, and just empowering me to see and dream beyond my existence based on the relationships and the mentoring and the support we got through the clubs. And then I highly engaged in that, got into sports, and then I realized that leadership was a part of my wheelhouse. And as I grew into those activities, and, you know, I grew up a fairly shy guy. A lot of it is because I was the youngest, and all of my siblings, they spoke for me. And so as I think about my experience during that time, it also gave me a voice, helped me identify who I am. And, went through that. My mom set some very aggressive goals. You had to get an education, you had to treat people right, and you had to put people first. And everything else, as she would say, would take care of itself. And so we followed that lead. Was fortunate enough to go on and graduate from high school and started at the University of Minnesota. And that's where I met my wife, and we locked arms, and we've been going now for 19 years, total of 25, because we test drove a little bit before we jumped the brook. And, we made two beautiful children. My daughter, she's at her first year at Mitchell Hamlin Law School. I have a ninth grade autistic son that's doing extremely well. And I'm a banker by accident. I graduated with an educational psychology major from the University of Minnesota, but I got into banking 18 years ago. US Bank hired me as a banker as a branch manager banker with no banking experience. So you talk about risk taking.
Yeah.
And again, being able to expand my brand where I could connect with people, turn mentorship into sponsorship, start to really challenge myself. And one thing, I think I'm fairly smart, but I think I'm more of a harder worker. And so that work ethic just took me further. And then I got into banking and realized that there was a space for me. When I first got into it, I didn't realize that, and I wasn't seen because at that time I was the first Black branch manager in my district. 5 years later, I got promoted to be a district manager, and I was the first Black district manager in our region. So I was always around the table as the only. I always had to show up. If the meeting started at 7:30, I needed to be there at 7:20 or 7:25.
That's right.
I didn't have that buffer because I was the only. But that also taught me the importance of showing up as I belong and commanding my space. Had some success there, and I went on to be a district manager for US Bank for about another 7.5 years. So after 12.5 years total with US Bank, I had the opportunity to diversify myself, expand my network, continue to learn and take on new challenges. And I went over to Wells Fargo. During that time, had to answer some questions to even my mother, like, is that the right move? Because I was doing so well at US Bank. But what I told her was that was another chapter. And I was entering into a new chapter because I was being called to do something. I didn't realize what it was. So I left US Bank, got to Wells Fargo. About 6 months after I got into Wells Fargo, we got hit with the COVID-19 pandemic. So now it's scrambling because there wasn't a blueprint or a playbook for how you lead people through that type of crisis or change. So we had to really engage there. We did that. And then shortly after that, May of that same year, we had the murder of George Floyd. That's where that conversation of bringing first independence came here. So really, if it wasn't for me answering the calling to move and grow into the opportunity at Wells Fargo, I wouldn't have landed here with First Independence Bank, because it was then at Wells Fargo's senior leadership came to me and said, we're recommending you to stand up this new Black-owned bank here. You are the prodigal son. You are the homeboy, as they call him.
Yeah.
And it was a great opportunity. And so I truly believe the journey that I've been on for the past 5 years was answering a call, and it was purpose driven for me to do something that really created this opportunity for the bank to be a part of this historic fabric of this region and this state.
What a wonderful story, Damon. What a powerful story. Let me bring Miguel back in before we bring Brother Braxton Haulcy in to reflect on what you said, and also to talk about his work, his exciting and powerful, impactful work at Walker West Music Academy. See, Miguel, can I get you back on screen? I think I can. And let me add you. I'll add you back. There you are.
There we go.
Would you agree with me, Miguel? Isn't this great radio? This is a great story. What do you think?
No, this is just one of the many great examples of just great audio storytelling. I mean, it's people to root for, but then it's also local people to root for as well. I'm representing South Side and North Side. I come all the way from Rice Street over in North End in St. Paul. And this is why I'm grateful for an outlet like KFAI. That was like my entry point into learning more and more and more about the stories coming out of all of Minneapolis as well.
Yeah.
So just, KFAI is right over here on the Mississippi River on the Twin Cities U of M campus. And this is kind of where the cities and the communities meet and come together.
And that's why I love being part of the KFAI organization and family as well. What particularly excites me is that we used to have the phrase, every now and then you hear it, a different radio station every hour. What does that mean? It means that at a given point of time in the day, the language might be English, it might be Spanish, it might be Hmong, it might be Karen, it might be Portuguese, different cultures finding a way to be home and to express what home is and to connect not only with the members of home right here in the community, but because of the technology to connect with home wherever home might be on the globe. And the home could be, in South Minneapolis at Little Earth, could be in Bemidji, or White Earth Reservation. Home for all of us is respected, appreciated, valued, and uplifted. And for that reason, we come to you, dear listener, to invite you to support this making of space, a place to recognize who we are and to shout our dignity to each other and to the world. You can do that by becoming a supporter of KFAI right now. You can go to our phone bank. We're waiting with people that'll take your pledge. The number is 612-375-9030. You can do it online. You might be anywhere in the world, in the country. We appreciate connecting with you, holding you as a member of our family, a family that's committed to the development of each and every one of us, that believes that we all have so much potential and we all are supposed to be here. We have a right to be here, and we have a duty to stand up and to make our voices part of the determination of what the future will be. We are writing the future. We are authors, co-authors of the future, and we take that seriously. You can support us by going online at kfai.org and make your pledge right now. We want you to do that. Any other things to say right now, Miguel?
Yes, we had one pledge come through in the past 15 minutes. A person by the name of Joe, maybe of some relation, maybe, to our great host here. But once again, we want to thank Joe for, just contributing live and just adding some more fire to the spark here. So thank you,
Joe. Thank you so much. And if you make your pledge, we'll shout you out as well. And you can also just let us know where you are. No matter where you are, go to the chat on YouTube or on Facebook or LinkedIn, wherever you are, and just say hello to all of us and let us know that you're tuned in. Share. Let somebody know this conversation is going on. Miguel, I'm going to call you back in a few minutes. We'll do another pledge wrap. And thank you so much. Thank you to all of the volunteers at the station for making this great work real and ongoing. Thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Let me bring in our second guest today, and that's Braxton Haulcy. He's Executive Director of Walker West Music Academy. Braxton, you've got a lot of great things to talk about. I'm going to start with you the same way, though. Let's do Walker West 101. What's the backstory, the background that leads us to the important things we're announcing and talking about today?
Oh, well, I guess, first of all, Damon, I wanted to really echo your whole idea around community and purpose. And that was very inspiring. And I can translate that into Walker West and how we do things at Walker West. The backstory of Walker West, when the school started in 1988 in Rondo, the crack cocaine epidemic was at the start in Rondo. And there was a lot of violence, a lot of shooting, and a lot of drug bust. And the community really wanted somebody to do something about it. And I always say that Reverend Walker and Grant West were like superheroes. They kind of just flew in and said, okay, we're going to do something about it. We're going to take these kids off the street and we're going to get them into music because, music is life affirming. And they were really, the folks that really brought the whole I mean, and it wasn't just about music as a nice to have. It was music as a need to have, and it's foundational. And they've been around since 1988, and actually they started a little bit before that because they were in a duplex on Hague before then. And the school has evolved significantly over since that period. I think initially we were focused on school age kids, and one of the things that happened when I came to Walker West is we did a strategic plan, and I said, music is healing to everyone. It's healing to the babies because it's brain development and impulse control and gets the kids ready for kindergarten. And we have a Homies in Harmony early childhood music program for infants as young as 6 weeks old. And then it's beneficial to elders because music is healthy aging of the brain. And we have, I think you've talked with them before, our dementia-friendly Amazing Grace chorus, which has been on CNN and TPT, et cetera, et cetera. And so we wanted to expand to all ages. At the same time, we wanted to get out of our silos because it's like there was McPhail School here, there was this school there, and there was Walker West. And we said, it's time to get out of the silos and be all about community. And we started expanding into the schools because especially in St. Paul, they've taken music out of the elementary and middle schools. And so there's a big gap in that area. And so we're deploying our instructors to go to those schools during the day and teach music, especially to Black and brown kids, because we know that music actually closes what they call this academic opportunity gap. And, I think when I had my first interview with you, when I first started at Walker West, my testimony was I was a D and F student when I was in second grade. And they talked to my mom. She helped me back. And then she enrolled me in music. And I went from D's and F's to A's in 1 year and graduated on the dean's list in college. And so I just really believe that teaching music changes lives. And I really am on a mission to make sure that our kids have music as foundational, almost as a right and a need to have and a must have. And so we've expanded in the community. I mean, we're wrapping up a residency, if you can't believe, in St. Cloud, because St. Cloud, their demographic has changed so much over the last 15 years that now all their 70% of their students are Black and brown students. And said, hey, we don't know how to engage these kids in music, and we'd like Walker West to come in and show us what you guys do. And so we're finishing up a 3-year residency there to really help them revamp their music programs to better engage Black and brown kids. We're doing things over in North Minneapolis, throughout St. Paul, and again, getting out in the community and doing what we can to just bring the power of music to heal, to support academics, and to do all of those things. And so that's kind of been the journey that we've been on. And I was looking the other day and it was talking about what has been the evolution of how we've moved. And I said, we started at the Hague duplex. And then when Reverend Walker and Grant was kicked out of there because the residents complained about it, they moved to 777 Selby Avenue, which was the old Hickory barbecue shop. And they've stayed there for several years. And then they moved catacorner across the street to 760 Selby. And then, when I first started at Walker West, I found out we had a non-renewable lease. And I said, oh, okay. I walked into this thing and our lease is expiring in 4 years. And so I said, oh, okay, I guess I got to find another space. And so, that's been the evolution of moving into this 650 Marshall Avenue, which was the old Wilder adult daycare. And we've revamped the school to really make it, I think I call it a cultural destination and community resource. We've moved from 6,000 square feet to, I think they said 16,000. It's 18,000 square feet. So we're doing from 6 studios to 18 studios. We have a recording studio. We have a digital music production lab, and we're going to have a 200 seating capacity auditorium, and we'll have an outdoor band shell and set up outdoor as well. And so the beautiful thing about this is that this is a space that we had a chance to design it the way we wanted to. And so when I sat down with the architects for the first time, I said, we will not call this a facility. We will not call this a building. We're going to call it a cultural destination and community resource. And so the design, when you come in here, you see the African-American liberal pillars, the green, the yellow, and the red. The wallpaper was designed by a designer in New York. She writes a lot of wellness stuff on the wallpaper. It's dark. We have those colors, the red and yellow and the green immersed into the building. And then when I was talking to them, I said, they asked me, what does African-American culture mean? I said, okay, let me break it down to you. And so I talked about, the transatlantic, the resilience, things of that sort. And then I said, if you go to the church, there's this thing called call and response. And that's a tradition. And when you're putting this cultural destination, it has to reflect our traditions, call and response. And so when they finished it up, they said, oh yeah, Braxton, we got call and response in here. Some of the studios stick out, some of them stick in, call and response. I said, oh, wow, that level of detail.
That's good.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that we really looked at within this space is I have 3 pillars. And it almost sounds like a business. You would kind of like this, Damon. I call it LLC. And I call it LLC for learning, listening, and creating. And so the learning piece of it is, we do the music lessons and the rehearsals with the instructors. The listening piece of it is we have a phenomenal music series called the Rondo Community Music Series, and it's led by our faculties who are some of the best in the country. They get a chance to present their music in front of the community. It's free and open to the public. And then last year, we took over the Selby Avenue Jazz Fest. And so that's the listening piece of the LLC. And then the piece that I'm most excited about is creating. That's creating your own music, doing your own songwriting, recording your music, because, you can learn to play somebody else's music, but the power of music is when you can create your own music. And so I'm trying to create composers and people that will go out and create something and really engage students to really want to create music for themselves and for our community and for the broader world. I rambled on a little bit, but
no, it's so perfect. It's so wonderful to hear, the backstory, and to have you feel comfortable enough to lay it out that way, the way you've done it. It's perfect. I asked Damon, and I'm going to ask you the same question. I'd love to get a sense of how you come to the work. You had a career in corporate world, and how did your career path lead you to stewardship and this next phase of your life work? And I don't know if did you hear my question? See, Damon, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Did you hear my question, Braxton?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so it's on you now. Go ahead, talk about how you came to the work.
For me, I started off when I was going to college as a music major.
No, where are you from? Where were you born?
That's hard to say because I'm an Army brat.
Uh-huh.
But I call my home base Fort Sill, Lawton, Oklahoma. My father was a World War II veteran. And so I started in music, and it was in the late 70s. And during that time, we had a lot of, you talk about tumultuousness. The prime rate was at 21%. Wow. We had the Iran crisis and the oil embargo, and music majors weren't getting jobs. And 2 years into the music program, I said, I'm not so sure I want to do this. And so at the time, I was engaged to somebody from Chicago, when I got out of high school, and they went to nursing school in Chicago. And so I ended up moving to Chicago, and I changed my major to accounting, and I went to school at DePaul in Chicago. And then I ended up doing, working with Amoco Oil. And then I went to graduate school at Purdue. And then that's how I came up to the Twin Cities, working for Pillsbury when Pillsbury was still around. And then I transitioned from Pillsbury to General Mills. And then I was General Mills for several years. And then I said, I'm tired of all this accounting and finance stuff. I want to go sell. And so they put me out to Philadelphia in their sales region. And I started selling Cheerios.
Oh.
That's good.
And so I did that for several years. And then I decided, I'd like to try some research. So I ended up working in market research for Information Resources, which was a competitor to AC Nielsen. And then I ended up leaving there and then actually working for AC Nielsen, calling on the General Mills account. And then I ran a shopper research firm for several years, working with about 1,300 anthropologists. And then at the age of 60, I said, you know what? I want to go back to music because that's where I started. And that's how I found out about the job at Walker West. And it was such a beautiful thing because all the experiences that I had running my own company and understanding cash flow and when you don't have it and what you need to do, I brought all of that to Walker West. And also, thinking about strategy and strategic planning, something they never did before. All of those things were wrapped into one. And so I just kind of came to Walker West. I looked at it, I said, I'm going to blow this place up. And that's exactly what I did. And, I still I'm thinking a lot about what you talked about, Damon, community, really focused on community and how can we, liberate our people and make our community the best it can be. And so, I just came to this opportunity thinking about community. And I always say Walker West is community first and music second.
Talk about the $19.5 million expansion. I mean, just the number in itself is sort of daunting. It could be, but apparently it was not for you and your board and your team and your community. But, how do we set our minds to marshaling energy and resources to build institutions that serve us, and you do it with a confidence that produces the result that you have produced?
Well, I'm going to say this up front. When I first decided to take this job, I met with my mentor, it was Dr. Beverly Hawkins of Model Cities of St. Paul.
Yeah.
And the first thing she did, she stuck her finger in my face and she said, "Are you a praying man?" And then she laughed at me and said, "You're in nonprofits, you're going to become a praying man." And between Dr. Hawkins and then my pastor, Ralph Galloway in North Minneapolis, and Reverend Walker, they just kind of surrounded themselves around me and say, this is a spiritual job. This ain't corporate. You need to be on your knees praying every day. And that's what's happened. I could always say, oh, well, I was able to do that. No, it was God working through me that allowed Walker West to get the resources that we did and using me as a vessel. I mean, I had the strategic planning, finance, and all of that. And I just kind of laid out, this is my vision. And this is the analytics to support the vision. And then I've sold before. So now I need to hit the streets and sell. And I had a good story to tell. Sometimes people don't, the Walker West story is such a beautiful story to tell.
Yeah.
And when people really realize how this school was started and the community corralled itself around Reverend Walker and Grant, the branding is easy. It's the perfect brand, but everybody knew about Walker West through word of mouth. And I said, no, we got to change that. It got to go beyond word of mouth. I would call the funders up when I first started. And I say, I'm with Walker West. Walker, who? Who are you talking about? I said, oh, okay. No. And so, we really rallied around the community. I rallied around the funders. And then the thing that I did that I never had to deal with is legislators. I mean, I actually convinced the board, we need to hire a lobbyist. And they're like, what? I said, yeah, if we're going to get any appropriations, we need to have a lobbyist sitting in those meetings and advocating for us. And so one of the beautiful things that happened, we got $4.1 million from the state.
Amazing.
And we closed the gap between when they were fussing and fighting, the Democrats and the Republicans, and there was a gap when we had everybody online, and we were able to go in there and get that money. And then we had a donor, unbeknownst to me, that knew Michael Wright of the Golden Time at that time. And Michael, and this is where community comes in. This donor had, her husband had a cement trucking company that built the road that went right through Rondo. And after George Floyd, she said, wow.
The road that destroyed Rondo.
Yeah, I really want to see what I can do to kind of do some repair. And so, she came and talked with me, and then saw that, we were actually in this building, because then this is community as well. Model cities had purchased the building for us and then leased it back while we were waiting for the legislators to make their decision, because Wilder wanted to get rid of the building, and we didn't have the appropriation yet. And so they bought the building for us, leased it back to us. We got the money from the state. We paid Model Cities back, and then the donor came in and gave us $4 million. Wow. And so, we're working $8 million. Then, last August, she came back and said, do you need any more money, Braxton? He gave us some more money. and then we had other donors that had contributed as well. And so we've raised $14 million of the $19.5 million in 2 years. And I mean, that's unheard of for a capital campaign. But I always say it's God's will. And it had nothing to do with me. I'm just a vessel.
I've heard the same kind of language from Damon. That's why I'm calling here, because Damon, you and I had talked, and you always refer to your sense of mission, sense of purpose, and your sense of serving a larger vision and mission. And so I want to have you, if you would, talk about how your, what's the right word for it, spiritual upbringing. You've got the training, you've got the knowledge, you've got the technology, you've got the tools, you've got the credentials, but there's something else at work as well. Does that make sense as a question, Damon?
It does. It does. And I appreciate that question. And the way I would start by describing it is, all those things help me make decisions from here. But as I got into this calling of my
for
journey,
our radio audience, he's pointing to the mind.
To my mind.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
To my mind.
Yeah.
And as this opportunity came, I realized it was a calling to follow what was coming and pulling at my heart. I had the opportunity to be in banking at that time for 14, almost 15 years. And I would say I had a pretty successful run as an employee, a teammate, a coworker, and an individual earner. And so here's was an opportunity for me to expand my degree of service, to say, how can we just help other people become connected with banking in a way where it can benefit them from a personal wealth building perspective. And a lot of it was, one of the fundamental things is knowledge and education. When I think about pathways to building wealth, yes, we can call out the three probably most clear fundamental pathways: home ownership, investing in some way, smart investing, I should say, and entrepreneur or being a business owner. But underneath that, the surface is, we got to have the education. We have to have the knowledge. And where I come from, what I look like, put me in a position where I can level the playing field and sit down with anyone, whether they look like me or where they didn't look like me, but come from an underserved, underrepresented space, or even in a space where they just wanted to be better stewards of banking. And I can be that trust ambassador. I can be that bridge builder or that connector to say, how can I help you be successful in this space, as we have had the opportunity to help so many other people. So I truly believe that this opportunity aligned with my why. That was my calling. This was the first Black-owned bank. However, it was important for this bank to be here, to be that, to serve as that connector, to serve as that trust ambassador for some even the larger regional banks. If we're being candid, specifically in this region and beyond, banking hasn't been as inclusive and it hasn't been as popular. Well, when that happens, the underlying root cause of people's disengagement is trust.
Mhm.
And so here was an opportunity for me to live it, experience it, but go share it with other people and ultimately sit across the table and help you understand, imagine what your dreams and your aspirations are, and to create a pathway so you can realistically get there and achieve it. So it was something that was bigger than me, right? And so even as I think about what success looks like, it kept me honest out with the fact that as we grade our success, even as an organization, we also have to factor in what's the success of individuals and community as a whole, because that is truly the opportunity here. And fortunately, it hasn't been a job. It's been a journey and it's been an experience. But I also believe that there was a lot of divine guidance and intervention to say, stay the course, regardless of what may come your way, because I'm using you as a vessel to connect and create opportunity for other individuals. And that's heavy, right? That's hard, because it's not sometimes your own understanding. But now that I can look back and reflect almost 4 years of being in this space, I can absolutely understand now what the purpose for me being in this seat, and the purpose for the bank coming here to be that beacon of hope or resource to community, and particularly youth. It's a huge opportunity to connect youth with financial education and wellness, just so you can create those behaviors earlier and sooner. And so here's an opportunity where I can be around the table to curate, well, what does that resource, what does that experience looks like? And then when we're talking about youth in particular in communities that look like us, it serves better when there is a person that look like them across the table. And so again, I was put in this seat to capitalize on that space, and that's been my calling.
Let me expand the conversation a little bit, and I want to shout out to Arthur Fleming, who sent a note in. Arthur, thank you for the note, and you can build on this again. But Arthur's note, and I'll put it up again, was expand our culture to the African continent. Pan-African culture is the future for our children. And I want to reflect on that for a minute to see how that statement resonates with both of you, given your arena, your distinct arenas of engagement. Braxton, for you, as a music institution, the music that you draw from is primarily that of our experience as Africans, African Americans, Africans in the New World. And we know the vitality, the genius, the inventiveness, and the healing that our musical, cultural, artistic traditions have provided. And I think Arthur Fleming is saying, knowing that means we have to recognize that this culture is global, and that we should be intentional in connecting with and associating with the genesis of our genius out of Africa. That's one comment. And then how do I bring that to you, brother, about banking? And my first impression is that both your locations are in a Black community now that is unique because it has changed and grown over the past 20 years in particular. Community is not just, the FDA, foundational FBA Black the city community now includes all of our Somali brothers, significant numbers of Kenyans and Ethiopians, significant numbers of Liberians, Ghanaians, Nigerians. And I'm suspecting that, Damon, as a banker, you are dealing with and supporting this evolving multinational structure or network of the Black experience. We're all Africans. Some of us are what I call New World Africans, but all of us are Africans in the New World, in the Western Hemisphere. And so how does this idea and the opportunity, so then business-wise, I was on the phone this morning with a friend of mine who was talking about different entrepreneurs who are from Nigeria and from Costa Rica and Ghana who haven't had a public profile, but they've been moving business across the globe, legitimate, good business, right? And so there are transactions occurring, and more transactions and it can occur that can mean wealth creation for us and also development and wealth creation for our counterparts at home in the Caribbean and South America and Africa. So as you look at the changing demographics, our community is not just African Americans, not just the ghetto. We really are looking at a global community that is discovering itself to be global. And as it makes that discovery, what is the impact for you as a banker? What is the impact for you as an educator and a cultural convener? So that's the question. Big question, long question, but it's a good question. So Damon and then Braxton.
Sure. There's a lot there, so I'm gonna unpack it. And you kind of froze up a little bit, so I missed some pieces, but I think I got where you're going. I think first and foremost, I'll touch on the importance of being connected to your culture, being connected to your community, to have a sense of purpose and belonging and know where you come from. I think we have a unique opportunity as African Americans to invest more time in research to really identify and get an understanding of what's our journey, what's our origin, because there's richness there, there's substance there, there's accountability there, and there's commitment there. And those are fundamental behaviors that are transferable. So I think it's no different than any other culture or community. You have to be rooted in who you are. I think you should prioritize not compromising that where it makes sense. As it pertains to this evolution of from a banking perspective, customer base or customer segment. To your point, even as we occupy space here on Lake Street, we will miss opportunity as we're talking about inclusive banking and connecting underserved communities or communities in general with resources if we don't address the fact that there's opportunities to make banking more inclusive for specifically Muslim communities. There's opportunity to look at and say, how do we look at our products and services to ensure that, or in way that they become more Sharia law compliant, just so we can be more inclusive. There are institutions that are doing it now. And so myself, I was tasked with that. In fact, a year after we opened, we were very intentional about meeting with the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, who is Muslim, who, by the way, comes from Detroit. And that was one of the things he tasked us with, is how can we be a leader or even be a part of that conversation to look at that? It may not happen right away, as I use his words, and that was 3 years ago, but it would be nice to be able to say that our region, Minnesota, was one of the leaders as we talk about innovation and all these other spaces that we're in from an industry or sector. How can we simply just look at banking to ensure that it's more inclusive to all communities? So I think if you just
let me cut you off there because I've got only a minute to go. Braxton, you got about 30 seconds, 45 seconds.
Well, real quickly, we've been doing a lot of our concerts and things online and streaming them as well as in person. So that gives us a global presence. And unbeknownst to most folks, Reverend Walker just traveled to Africa and they've named a school after him in Sierra Leone. And he's a visionary that is really trying to get us to expand. We have instructors that are from Nigeria. They bring the Afro beats and that type of music to Walker West, so that we're doing this cross-cultural way of delivering the music and teaching the music as well. So yeah, we're already on that.
And I would just add this because it's important.
Yeah.
We also we established a community advisory council. And that's where we've really been able to leverage that group to ensure that we have that voice and those ears within various communities, so we can be very intentional about bringing solutions to those evolving communities as well.
Phenomenal. What a wonderful conversation. We are seconds away from closing the show, but gentlemen, this has been a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you for what you do and what you bring to our community. To our listeners, thank you for listening and thank you for support. Again, I close by inviting you to support this station, KFAI, at kfai.org online or calling our pledge line 612-375-9030. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Braxton.